her bottom to just come out, and she was within 50 yards of me for maybe 6 hours.
Wow.
And she fell for no tricks, and she would not bust out. You would walk within 10 yards of her before she would explode and get up well before. And you're not going to shoot at something running because you don't want to just hurt it for no reason.
Right.
So it's just, she was just mocking me all day long. And towards the end of the day, I felt like I'd just been there too long and I jumped her maybe 10 times. And she just wouldn't leave the area. She just stayed in this little thicket that you could not see in. And so I was like, I'll come back tomorrow. It's the end of the day. There's a hill there's only one hill in this entire area that has an open plane of view. I'll go there. And I'm sitting there, and it's sunset, and it's north central Arizona. So beautiful red sunset, beautiful red landscape, and it's just about the end of legal shooting hour, and he comes bouncing out of this little stand of cottonwoods where you'd assume that this is the only patch of cover in forever, and you assume there's something in there, but you just couldn't imagine that he would come out. And he holds up at like 570 yards because he sees a horse, and then he goes a little bit further, and I shoot and completely missed it because I didn't turn my scope up. So I shot probably 20 feet over his head, but he had no idea. And so dialed the scope back to where it was, took the second shot, and now we're at 587, and it was perfect. Went exactly where you would want it to go, hit no bones, double lungs. He was down in 15 seconds, maybe walked 10 feet, and it just couldn't have been better. Like it was set up because the sun is down now, and a hot day has gone cold. That means that he's going to last longer, and it's going to be easier to cut up even if it is dark. And he didn't fall. He didn't have to do a second shot. Didn't have to. And elk are so strong that quite often it takes multiple shots just to make them just stop running away. Right. And it was a perfect moment. It was orchestrated almost.
That's amazing.
And it was And so every time I eat a bit, I go back.
Right.
And that, there's something that I can't get from, any other kind of steak that I eat, any other kind of meat that I'm having. I'm just not going to catch that level of history, and it's not going to be that important to me. And that's why, that was one of those things that I realized when I was kind of getting started out in all this, is, there's very few things that are more important than what you put in yourself. And there's very few things that are more of a shame than having to, than having to get rid of something that died to take care of you. So it's like somebody killed a cow to feed you, and you threw half of it away because screw it, and there's just no value on that. So that was a piece of his backstrap. And these two are going to come out of one of these roasts that we're going to cut into in a minute.
It's interesting, the texture is like it crumbles up in your mouth as you chew it.
Mm-hmm.
It crumbles away. I like that you don't, your level of seasoning is spot on.
Yep. And that's something too, is you have to learn how to cook. And since I already was fairly into it, it was like the natural next step. You're like, okay, obviously we just want to work with better ingredients, and this is harder to cook, so you have to learn way more techniques. You can't just throw it on the grill because it'll dry out very fast. There's no fat in it. Like you look at that, there's zero more. So it's nice, clean grain, but if you don't season it right, all people are going to taste is the grass. And they'll only taste the sagebrush. It eats much more powerful, flavorful things than, a grain and corn-fed cow. No, I'll get you. How's the leg? So that's the other part of it. It does seem to taste as good or better. Less calorie, twice the protein, half the fat as beef. So, again, if you're coming into something like with my family, there's diabetes, there's heart conditions, there's all these other things, and you want to eat meat because you just want it, which I completely understand the mentality of. Something like this, buying half a grass-fed cow, doing the work, putting it in there, and then knowing every time you eat it that, like, guys, this is a special occasion, and making it an actual sacrifice that the animal gives so that we, have energy, and we can actually, not just energy, but we can have it the way we want it. That's a big motivator, too.
How did you prepare this before it was cooked?
Salt and pepper, pretty heavy. Smoke it on the Traeger for about an hour and a half at a low heat, and then turned it up to 225 after about 45 minutes. So went 180 to 225. Then cast iron pan, hot as hell.
Yep.
Sear all sides. Wrap it in foil. Let it sit for 10 minutes, and there she is.
I'm gonna have to get a Traeger.
Mm-hmm.
Both my brother-in-laws back in PA have those. They're both hunters. My dad was a hunter. My brother Ron, in passing, that you've met, my oldest brother,
Yeah.
he's a hunter. He does fly fishing too. Yeah. I grew up, and all my uncles, all hunters. I grew up with it all around. I grew up with a gun chest in the living room next to the TV. It's like 20 gauges and 10 gauges, and
It's different.
and now I think about doing that now and having a gun chest in the living room. My wife would be like, insane.
Yeah, I could barely even do this. I had to farm the wife and kid out to the in-laws so that I can cut this thing up.
Oh, they don't want to be around it.
Nobody wants to. Very few people actually want to see it.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm thrilled.
Well, yeah. Okay. So very few people that are like my relatives. Again, I don't come from a gun culture. I don't come from a hunting culture. They're about as it's about as left-leaning a family as it gets.
Well, you seem pretty damn knowledgeable about it. How did you? So you the one
Dive all the way in.
dive all the way in.
Yeah.
How did you learn about the firearms? What's needed?
Well, I looked it up. Again, it's probably top 10 beginner rifles kind of thing, and
Right.
read maybe 100 of those articles, and they all kind of come to the same 3 options, and they're all pretty reasonable. You can get a real quality deer rifle it's got a plastic crappy stock, but it will hit where it's supposed to hit with a big enough bullet to bring down anything on the continent for like $350 with a scope, with a really high grade trigger, just a poor stock, and you can actually upgrade the stocks if you want to. So I bought one of those and I shot with it, and I'm terrible shooting at it. So now, the scary thing was I kind of booked the hunt before I bought the gun.
Wow.
I just knew I want to go experience this. This is how it's going to be, and I shot with that, and I never developed any kind of fire discipline, yanking the trigger, and so it would get on paper, and it would be like, oh, bullseye. I'm like, great, I can hit the bullseye, then rack one, and the next one was 6 inches higher.
Right.
There's just it's not the gun's fault at this point. There's no real reason.
Archer, not the arrow.
It's definitely not the arrow in this case. So it was no success there. But I was going to go through with this thing anyway, and I've always been of the opinion, because I'm silly, that it's just sort of it must be the gear. Even though I knew it was me missing, I felt like it was the gear, and so I was this way with guitars when I was younger. I would think that my guitar sucked, and in order to dissuade myself from this, I would find somebody that was good at guitar, and I'd say, play that guitar, which I know a lot of guys will never allow you to touch it. Don't touch my guitar, and certainly don't touch it better than I can. And I wanted to see what it was like when, somebody actually knew what they were doing. So I did the same thing. I went and got some lessons on the rifle, and it didn't get better. And I went on the hunt anyway, and because I was good enough, but still really unconfident with it. I didn't trust my gun because I felt like, again, it was the gun, not me. So I borrowed a gun from the guide at the ranch, and it was a very nice one, top of the line, 30-06. It was an easy shot that I took. It was about 120 yards, so kind of hard to mess up, and I got it right where I would have wanted it anyway. So that got me through step one, and then all of a sudden it's like...
So that was your first hunting kill?
Yeah.
Was with a borrowed gun?
Borrowed gun.
Borrowed 30-06.
On an enormous animal. So I didn't start off with pigs, which is what I would suggest to people. Something that's findable, affordable, and that everybody kind of hates.
Everybody kind of hates?
Yeah, everybody hates a pig. Because they're smart and they're destructive. And so you can't even just say it's like, oh, you just accidentally ruined it. Like, that they're going to come back and they're going to ruin whatever you have. And
pigs are filthy animal.
And they're ugly. And nobody wants to think about that. And they're also still tasty.
They are.
So it becomes that's what I would recommend people start with. But I started with an elk because I wanted elk. Because I'd heard about it. And I found this place. I was shopping for a cow elk hunt. You can kind of find a landowner in a lot of states that they have tags because it's it's part of the government program to keep the elk herds alive. Is when they find a property that works, they incentivize the landowner. Say, hey man, you could take a few every year based off of our scientific analysis and how many elk we feel this area could actually support. And then that guy gets to sell it off. So I found a couple in Utah that I was going to go to. And then the last second, there was this cancellation at this place in California, which is only a few hours away. And just all lucked out. And once I got it in... Once I walked out there and felt silly, dressed silly, knew nothing about it. I'm fully grown. I'm an adult, but I'm acting like a kid.
Right.
Because I am to these people. These guys have been doing this their entire lives.
Yeah.
They've been on this place their entire lives. They know every inch of the entire place. And, you just kind of go through it. And I realized...
Were they cool or were they intolerant of your age and lack of knowledge?
They're great.
They were great.
I've never met
That's
a
good.
single guy in this business, even the ones that had every reason to, who looked down on me or, they'd kind of make some jokes, make some, like liberal jokes.
Right.
And and that's it. They would kind of go and... But salt of the earth kind of people, exactly who you'd expect. They have their beliefs and the way they do things, and just like everybody else, you kind of just listen and respect them and look at them like, like their take is important, because especially in this case, it was.
Right.
It doesn't happen if they don't help me.
Right.
They certainly did help me, and I ended up being pretty good friends with them for the last several years. The whole family. I got to meet the kids and become friends with the son and help him out through some health issues and stuff like that. And it was eye opening, because you always assume that the smart guy is the one who talks the most.
Right.
And you assume that maybe if you hear someone talking some country stuff, it's like, oh, he must be dumb. Because they're so much smarter than I am. All these other different things I had known nothing about. Like, they could fix a car. They could vocalize a sound that a car makes. And 5 of them were like, I know what the issue is. They all know the exact same issue based off of a voice.
Right.
There's some guy repeating a kind of...
So you get this big animal for your first kill.
Yeah.
Did you process it yourself?
I didn't.
You did not.
No. It was too ambitious to try to do something like this at that time. I didn't have anything.
Right.
I didn't have the butchery skills or knowledge. I kind of dove into it as unprepared as I could, because I didn't want to do some $50,000